haunting the internet and all of the media it could reach for 10 years, birthed from the attempt to make the scariest image for a forum contest. And ever since then, he's gone from being one of the web's most terrifying creatures to infecting the world of games and film. This is the Slender Man. As the name implies, he's a skinny and tall humanoid creature, typically reaching from about 6 to 10 feet tall, and in some extreme cases, even more than that. He may seem rather sophisticated with his pitch black suit, but if you look just a bit higher, you'll see the defining feature of this horrid monster, or lack thereof. The Slender Man doesn't have a face. He appears almost mannequin-like because of this, which is particularly more effective against those who suffer automatonophobia, the fear of something having a false sense of life, much like puppets or animatronics. If that wasn't bad enough, then the Slender Man also has tentacles that could reach from behind his back to grab his prey. He's a creature that stalks his victims, mainly children, and abducts them to do as he pleases. There are many different interpretations of Slender Man and what he does once he catches his next person. Some say that he simply kills them off and leaves their body behind. Others say that he takes them to another dimension to either feed off their flesh or stalk them for all eternity. Maybe the goal isn't even to catch someone, but instead to drive them mad. Nonetheless, there's a lot of history behind the Slender Man, and today, we're going to look down this path, how the Slender Man has changed throughout this decade, and what he's been doing to scare his next victim. Welcome to Cackling Pumpkins, and this is 10 Years of Slender Man. It's 2009, and the website Something Awful Forums is holding a contest for its users to create paranormal sightings using software like Photoshop to bring their horror to life. On June 10th, 2009, the user Victor Surge, real name Eric Knudsen, uploaded 2 different images, both of the Slender Man's first appearance. Both of these images also had their own little fake newspaper articles to go alongside them. One featured the Slender Man behind a group of kids walking towards the camera. "We didn't want to go. We didn't want to kill them. But its persistent silence and outstretched arms horrified and comforted us at the same time." The other is where he can be seen in a playground hiding in the shadows of a tree with a pack of 4 kids surrounding him. One of 2 recorded photographs of the Sterling City Library blaze, notable for being taken today, which 14 children vanish, and for what is referred to as the Slender Man. Deformity is cited as filmed effects by official. Fire at library occurred 1 week later. Actual photograph confiscated as evidence. When creating the Slender Man, Eric took most of his inspiration from horror-based literature. H.P. Lovecraft's strange interdimensional creatures like Shoggoth and Cthulhu are a prime example, along with The Mist by Stephen King. Others include Something Awful's own That Insidious Beast by Zach Parson. Also the Resident Evil franchise from Capcom, and Silent Hill from Konami. Yet the most significant inspirations come from the Tall Man from the 1979 film Phantasm, and real-life myths and urban legends, from the story of Mothman, Shadow People, and the story of the Mad Gasser of Mattoon. The Mad Gasser of Mattoon is a person who many people theorize was responsible for several gas attacks in Mattoon, Illinois, taking place during the 1940s. But this was written off as mass hysteria, which could explain the connection to Slender Man. After the Something Awful post was made, the Slender Man took off as the internet's new horror monster. Though he was only known by word of mouth, which could explain the several different interpretations of Slender Man throughout the internet's history with the monster, it didn't take long for Slender Man to become more recognizable as one web series would stand above the rest. A web series that is still beloved by many, and also passed its 10-year anniversary. Starting only 10 days after the Slender Man's creation, Marble Hornets premiered on June 20th, 2009. Marble Hornets follows Jay Merrick, who simply wants to know what happened to his friend Alex Crayley and his unfinished student film also called Marble Hornets. The student film halted production and Alex stopped communicating with those around him like Jay, only to start sending videotapes to his friend. This kicks off a found footage mystery from Jay's perspective as he and the audience are attempting to put the pieces together while avoiding the operator. The operator is basically this series' interpretation of Slender Man, and was the origin of some of the monster's most famous aspects, such as proxies. A proxy is a person who loses their free will, and essentially becomes a puppet to both the operator and the Slender Man. And also, Slender Sickness, or simply put as, the sickness. If someone is within Slender's range for an extended period of time, then they may be affected by symptoms of nosebleeds, fatigue, fevers, vomiting, exhaustion, coughing up blood, and other symptoms that are comparable to being exposed to radiation. Marble Hornets went on for 5 years until ending on June 20th, 2014, the series' 5-year anniversary. Marble Hornets was a fantastic web series that has inspired dozens of others that came after. There were also other horror web series similar to Marble Hornets that came around the same time, though I would say that these series are only similar in the found footage and Slender aspects, while also being different in every other way. These include Everyman Hybrid, coming in March of 2010. This web series follows 3 friends by the names of Vince, Jeff, and Evan, as they try to create fitness videos but find themselves interrupted by creatures like the Slender Man and also another famous internet horror monster called the Rake. Caught Not Sleeping in March 2011, following an unnamed individual at which viewers call Caught. Caught is going through exhaustion during the day, despite having a healthy amount of sleep. He begins being referenced by a YouTube user by the name of Hvalross Seville, and begins to believe that he is being followed by the Slender Man. The series shows his descension into madness as his mood changes wildly throughout the series. There are dozens of other web series like Marble Hornets out there that are worth looking into, but while these series became popular then, what really brought Slender Man into the mainstream were the subtle beginnings of some of YouTube's biggest creators. On June 26, 2012, the Slender Man had officially entered the gaming world with Slender The 8 Pages. Slender The 8 Pages is a free-to-download game developed by Parsec Productions. The goal of the game is simple: walk around the forest in the middle of the night and collect 8 pages that are randomly generated between 10 distinct landmarks. As you collect each page, the Slender Man will begin following you more and more, as he becomes more sporadic and violent in his movement. One of the biggest scare factors of this game is its sound design. Every time you collect a page, a loud thumping noise can be heard, as it raises in volume with the more notes you collect. The Slender Man can only kill you if you're either too close or look at him for too long. A very basic yet just as effective premise. So effective that the game became the first big horror indie game to become this popular, as others would follow from behind, like Five Nights at Freddy's, Bendy and the Ink Machine, and Baldi's Basics in Education and Learning. So how did this game become so popular? Well, let's just say that the Slender Man got some help from a certain group of people as he would return the favor. YouTube is a video uploading site that opened on February 14th, 2005. For several years, its algorithm was originally different from what it is now. For those who don't know, the algorithm is what determines which videos get in the front page or in the recommended section. Originally, the algorithm was simply based on views. It didn't matter how long your video was, what it was about, or who made it. If it got views, it most likely got in the front page. This was until March 2012. YouTube wanted to keep viewers engaged on their site for a longer period of time. So, the algorithm was changed from views to minutes watched. This system would specifically cater to people who made longer videos in a shorter period of time. While this made people like animators, skit creators, and indie directors overshadowed, it also allowed for vloggers, makeup artists, and Let's Players to essentially take over. The Let's Play community was the first attempt to combat the algorithmic changes. As the algorithm changed on March 2012, and Slender The 8 Pages came out on June 2012, it almost felt like fate that Slender Man would benefit from both. Countless Let's Players such as Markiplier, The Gaming Lemon, and PewDiePie would record their reactions playing this haunting experience. I'd like you to keep in mind, this is long before any of these creators would even get their first million subscribers. They were essentially nobodies back then. But the pieces were in the right place for them, and several to kick off their future careers, as they also coincidentally were spreading the Slender Man to an even bigger audience. But they wouldn't be the only ones who would help spread Slender Man around. But they were the loudest, as there was a quieter group that's focus was to scare you rather than cause laughter. Another community that was getting quite popular thanks to both the Slender Man and the algorithm's changes was the CreepyPasta community. From the writers who made such stories, to the narrators who read them on sites like YouTube, you were hearing all sorts of stories, like a cursed version of a nostalgic video game, or the newest monster and psychological killer. Jeff the Killer, The Rake, Laughing Jack, Zalgo, Smile Dog, Sonic.exe, Bob, Jane the Killer, and even Suicide Mouse were just a few of the monsters that spawned from this community. But what is a creepypasta? Creepypasta derives from the term copypasta, which is a line of text that is copy and pasted throughout the internet. A creepypasta is essentially the same concept, but with it being a horror story instead of a simple line of text. From those old chain letter emails telling you to send this message to 10 people in the next hour or your parents will be killed by the ghost of Mary, to the countless stories submitted to sites like CreepyPasta.com and the Creepypasta Wiki. While the Slender Man was never specifically meant to be another creepypasta monster, he was often accepted as such. While creepypastas are technically nothing new on their own, the narration scene was something different for YouTube's homepage. Creators like CreepyPasta, CreepyPasta Jr., and of course, Mr. Creepypasta were some of the biggest in their field. So, the Slender Man had the privilege of not just one, but two entirely new communities, both getting a boost thanks to the newly changed algorithm, and in turn, giving Slender Man himself a boost, especially with stories like Slender Man is Real, An October Birth, The Slender Man Cometh, and Jeff the Killer vs. Slender Man, all giving a tentacle or two. This is kind of ironic too, since in some interpretations, if you even just know about the Slender Man, there's a good chance you may be his next victim, and the word would only spread further with one last boost. On March 26, 2013, Parsec Productions worked with Blue Isle Studios to create an official sequel to Slender The 8 Pages. In collaboration with Slender Man's own creator Eric Knudsen and Joseph Delage, Troy Wagner, and Tim Sutton, the creators of Marble Hornets, writing the story, the result was Slender The Arrival. You take control of Lauren, who's visiting her old childhood friend Kate. Kate has been acting kinda weird lately, sending several strange letters to Lauren. Once arriving at Kate's house, she finds the door ajar and quickly gets forced into a horrific trail where she's hunted down by a masked figure called the Chaser, who is believed to be Kate turned into a proxy, and of course, the Slender Man. With each location, you have to perform some type of task that forces you to move around said location with the Slender Man always right behind you, from collecting pages much like in the original game, to activating machines in a factory, and running through a forest fire as an enraged Slender Man appears before you. The game was given decent scores, but nothing too great. GameSpot gave it an 8.5 out of 10, IGN gave it a 6.5 out of 10, and Game Trailers gave it a 6.1 out of 10. After the original release on PC and Mac, the game was later ported to several home consoles for the next coming years. These consoles being the Xbox 360 on September 23rd, 2014, the PlayStation 3 on September 24th, 2014, the PlayStation 4 on March 24th, 2015, the Xbox One on March 25th, 2015, the Wii U on October 22nd, 2015, and as hard as it may be to believe, the most recent release was on June 20th, 2019 for the Nintendo Switch. The Switch release technically being the first handheld version of Slender The Arrival due to the Switch's unique hybrid function. However, Slender Man The Arrival was the last positive thing to happen to the Slender Man, as things would start going downhill for the next coming years. And I'm pretty sure you already know where we're heading next. Now before we continue, I must warn you, this next section will go over a real-life event involving the harm of a young child. If you are at all squeamish, then I recommend skipping this part of the documentary by clicking this timestamp. But if you can handle it, or know what's coming, then let's go over the event that changed everything. What is simply known as the Slender Man stabbing. It started when two 12-year-old girls by the names of Anissa E. Ware and Morgan E. Geiser discovered the internet monster. After learning about the creature, these girls had started to believe that not only is the Slender Man real, but he was after them and their families as well. But they believed if they were to sacrifice someone to him, then the Slender Man would leave their loved ones alone. Despite the fact that there is little to no media or mythos that depict the Slender Man taking sacrifices, with the only exceptions being a few fan-made indie films and stories that have no correlation to official material and those behind said material. Nonetheless, Anissa and Morgan found classmate Peyton Leutner. Their original plan was to duct tape her mouth shut and slit her throat on May 30th, 2014. This did not happen as the girls felt Peyton needed one more day to live. Another sick idea was to stab her in the bathroom of a local park, as her blood would go down the drain of the floor. What happened instead was on May 31st, 2014, the two girls lured Peyton into the forest with a game of hide and seek. When she was least expecting it, Peyton was knocked down and held to the ground as she was stabbed up to 19 times with a 5-inch long kitchen knife. The girls fled the scene as their victim crawled out of the forest, where she was found by Greg Steinberg, who was riding his bike through the neighborhood. Not too long after, both Anissa and Morgan were arrested by Interstate 94, and the weapon used was also found with the girls. Peyton was hospitalized, but thankfully made it out okay, leaving the hospital only 1 week later, as she would return to school fall of that same year. Anissa and Morgan, however, they would spend the next 3 years of their lives in court, as in 2017, both girls would plead guilty to second-degree homicide, yet the judge would find them not guilty for reasons of mental disease or defect. They were sentenced to a state psychiatric institute. Anissa for 25 years to life, including the 3 years on trial, as Morgan would get the maximum of 40 years to life. But in 2018, Anissa would then be sentenced 40 years to be under mental health facility supervision. Right after the stabbings, many involved with Slender Man-based material and the CreepyPasta community shared their condolences. Mr. CreepyPasta even started a charity livestream featuring other CreepyPasta creators with the intent of raising money for the family of the stabbing's victim, doing it under the slogan, "Stand for creativity, not reality," showing how fiction is nothing more than just that. Stories and monsters shouldn't be seen as real apparitions just because they're documented on the internet. I don't want to stay on this topic for too long considering its depressing subject matter, so I'll just end it with this. I do not believe that the character Slender Man is to blame for this attack. I personally believe that this event would have happened anyway, even if the Slender Man never existed. It has less to do with the creature itself, and more how people perceive the material they consume on the internet. It's important to tell people, especially young kids, that not everything you see online is real, or something that should be taken that seriously. But let's move on to what comes next. I gotta warn you though, the road is going to get a little bumpy. After this event, Slender-based material started to trickle away. Less people were making Slender-based or inspired content, most likely as a form of respect for what happened. Despite the full game being completed, Slender The Arrival didn't start coming to consoles until 18 months after the PC release, for most likely the same reason. But by the time the Slender Man could have made a grand return to the internet, a new horror icon took his place. A new game made by one man, starring 4 monsters and taking 5 nights to complete. Five Nights at Freddy's came out on August 8th, 2014. Five Nights at Freddy's, often abbreviated as FNAF, is a short hour-long indie horror game made by developer Scott Cawthon that got extremely popular thanks to both the Let's Play and the CreepyPasta communities, which also helped the Slender Man. The game has you play as a newly hired security guard working the night shift at a Freddy Fazbear pizzeria. You must watch the security system and keep an eye on the constantly moving animal characters. If they find you, they'll put your body in a Freddy Fazbear suit filled to the brim with metal pieces and wires. That is unless you close the metal doors at the right time. But there's one catch. Everything is electrically powered, and if you use too much power, then the building will shut down, leaving you at the mercy of these animal creatures. Unlike Slender Man, the Five Nights at Freddy's brand is still going strong, with so far 9 games, including both an RPG and a VR experience, a line of books, toys, board games, and even a movie being developed by Blumhouse Studios, the same company behind rather exceptional horror films like the Paranormal Activity franchise, Insidious, The Purge, Get Out, and the recent Halloween movie, so unlike Slender Man's film, you know the brand is in good hands. The Slender Man's journey is seemingly at an end. Five Nights at Freddy's took his spot in games and CreepyPasta. Marble Hornets ended the same year, and most people have moved on to other indie horror icons like Bendy, Monica, and even Baldi. And unlike other popular internet horror characters like Freddy Fazbear and Salad Fingers, who still get massive success to this day, it would seem that Slender Man content was coming to an end, and the only thing people seem to remember him for was the stabbing, including HBO. On March 11th, 2016, director Irene Taylor Brodsky worked with HBO Films to create a 2-hour-long documentary called Beware the Slender Man. But despite the title of the documentary being clearly in reference to Slender Man, the film itself had little to nothing to do with the monster, but more the 2014 stabbings. This, of course, brought in controversy due to the film's title misleading the viewer and basically telling the audience that this is all the character should be known for. It has also run into recent controversy for using paintings and music of other content creators without their permission, such as a painting by Joel Coleman called "No One Can Enter the Lord's House Except as a Child." Joe is now attempting to sue HBO for use of his work in the documentary. As of the time of writing this script, nothing else has seemed to have gone through with these cases yet, and we'll just have to wait and see if Joe and the other creators get justice. Truly, the documentary is not worth looking into if you want to learn about the monster himself. There isn't much to the story, so let's move on to the next, and what seems to be the final spot in the forest. On May 2016, production started on what would eventually be known as the Slender Man movie, releasing on August 10th, 2018. Directed by Sylvia White and distributed by Sony Pictures, the movie takes place within the state of Massachusetts, where 4 girls somehow summon the Slender Man. It's revealed that one of the girls, Katie Jensen, played by Annalise Basso, my apologies if I pronounced that name wrong, was a part of the occult, and she summoned the Slender Man because she wanted him to take her. As an attempt to get their friend back, Ren, played by Joey King, Haley, played by Julia Galdani Tales, once again I apologize if I mispronounced that name, and Chloe, played by Jazz Sinclair, attempt to summon the Slender Man themselves. They are warned not to open their eyes or look at the Slender Man, but Chloe does so and looks at the Slender Man face to lack of face. Thus the Slender Man begins to torment her. The film was met with negative reception by both reviewers and moviegoers. Some called it derivative, while others called it insensitive due to the stabbings that happened 4 years before. Even Anissa's father, Bill Ware, called the film as in quote, extremely distasteful, which even though the Slender Man is more than just an inspiration for an attack, it's completely understandable why he would view the movie as such. Bill's only exposure to the Slender Man was through the stabbings, so it's hard for him as a parent of one of the attackers to see him as anything but that. This is most likely why the film wasn't released in the Waukesha and Milwaukee counties of Wisconsin, as they were where the attacks took place. The film was also barely marketed, and it's unknown as to why that is. Either Sony had other films they had more faith in, or they were afraid of the controversy the film could stir up. The film grossed about $51.7 million, which isn't great, but its budget was estimated to be around $10 million. To be considered a successful film, you must make double your budget. So, technically speaking, the Slender Man movie was successful in its own merits, but it was still seen as a failure in comparison to other films released in 2018, like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Black Panther, Avengers Endgame, and The Incredibles 2. The movie and the Switch release of Slender The Arrival was the last thing we've seen of the Slender Man, and so far it doesn't seem like anything is coming for the monster anytime soon. The Slender Man seems to be very well dead in the eyes of many. But is this really the end? Is the Slender Man's fate really just to be a forgotten trend and an inspiration for an attempt of murder? It's possible, but it's also possible that things could change for the character and brand. Many of those within the horror community, including myself, are still passionate about the character and the stories he could tell. Maybe the right creator will come in and use the Slender Man to make something that could really make people wow and change their perspective of the character. Maybe he could be the next killer in Dead by Daylight. Maybe Netflix could adopt the character in some way. Maybe a new Slender game could come out that changes the formula to be something truly amazing. All we can do is wait and watch the forest for anything, and maybe, just maybe, we might see a page and want to go out and investigate. I surely hope that this won't be the end for the Slender Man.